Hi, I'm Peter Clines, and in the before time, I ran the Writers Coffeehouse at Dark Delicacies in Burbank, California. Now that we're all social distancing, some friends and I are going to try and answer your writing questions here online. So ask away. Anyway, hey, thanks everyone for being here and ignoring the earlier technical difficulties that no one watching this video will know about.
Unless we tell them.
Yeah.
Unless we tell them a lot.
Unless we tell them, but let's not. Let's go right into. I have a question from Thomas. Thomas basically wanted to know, due to the pandemic, do you see a potential increase or decrease in publishing of books versus digital, since the virus could live for more than a day on paper?
Okay.
Anyone have publishing thoughts on how the current state of the world is going to?
Before we get into publishing thoughts, where I don't actually know all that much about it, I mean, I have some thoughts, but it's all anecdotal. In terms of the virus living for more than a day on books, that is not something to worry about.
That's what I was going to say too, from the biology background. Yeah.
We have a doctor on the call. She can answer this question.
Oh, that's true. Well, okay, you can answer it better than I
Kristi,
am.
this is all you.
No, you go. You go.
No, seriously, Kristi.
Everything I've read has said there is
PhD.
a vast difference between the ability to literally detect any virus at all and it being a viable route for infection. All the evidence shows that, like, I think they're called fomites. I don't know why I know
That's
that
correct.
word.
You got it.
But is
Yeah.
not a big
Oh,
vector for
Jeopardy.
this virus, that it's all about people coughing on each other. And so
Absolutely.
don't worry about getting infected from a book. If there's impact on the publishing industry, which there definitely is, it's because all the bookstores are closed.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and they're closed because we don't want people coughing on each other. It's not about the books per se.
You know what's funny though, because when I got this question, I was looking at it. This happened to pop up on a newsletter I got. Did you guys know paper book sales actually went up in April?
Yeah.
They went up like 5%.
That's not shocking. That's why all my neighbors here who work at Amazon are buying new cars.
But that's it. I think right off the bat, that's a good sign for, okay, how is publishing going to deal with this?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of that interesting element where you can only watch so much TV, is the sad truth of it. And so
Don't tell me what I can do.
I challenge that statement.
But I think a lot of people kind of hit that element where they found that they were reading more or doing a lot. I think the question of ebook versus print, I don't think the pandemic is going to be that tipping point, because ebook versus print is very much in terms of how you prefer to consume your media. Some people like ebooks quite a lot. Other people just really cannot, use it for a book form. They can do it for maybe an article. They really just can't. We do process information a little bit differently on screen versus a book, which is a whole other issue when you get to college classes and things like that, which we had a lot of fun with this semester. But in terms of how people consume their media, as long as Amazon is still, and hopefully other venues are delivering books, I don't think it's going to necessarily push anyone to ebook who wasn't already an ebook aficionado. I think, if anything, people are doubling down on their preferred formats. Like, people who read print were buying more print books because they were running through them a little bit faster. People who were, like ebooks, were buying those a little bit faster because they were running through them a little bit faster.
Brief plug for bookshop.org, which is a site where you can buy books from non-Amazon sources, and it supports indie bookstores.
Good plug.
Yeah.
Cool.
Actually, I was going to ask, how many of you guys, I know from me in Southern California, all three of my favorite bookstores, Dark Delicacies, The Last Bookstore, and Mysterious Galaxy, all of them are doing curbside pickup or some kind of
that's
nice delivery system. Like The Last Bookstore is doing curated book packages.
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
I think our local indie is doing something like that, Brick and Mortar Books in Redmond. And I know Third Place Books is doing something like that.
Third Place Books is great.
Yeah.
They do so many things, like so many activities and stuff. So that I'm not surprised.
But that speaks to, I think there's a couple of ways this can affect publishing. One of the most obvious over the kind of like medium to long term is how much damage this ends up doing to bookstores, right? Because bookstores is a notoriously thin margin business. They don't operate with a lot of a safety net. They're trying their best, and a lot of them are doing great stuff, and you should support your local indie. But if a lot of them end up closing, you know, if we stay closed for 6 more months, and these bookstores are not going to reopen, and that could do a lot of damage. And in the worst case, if something like Barnes & Noble goes out of business, that could do a lot of damage.
I think there's also, related to that, the issue that sort of developed over the past is just sheer unemployment. That I'm willing to bet a lot of people watching this right now know at least one person who's out of work.
Well, and that's the sort of second thing is, like, as Robin was saying, I think it's less about the pandemic per se, because people are still reading, they're reading plenty of books, they're buying plenty of books. It's more about that obviously we're currently in a recession. We don't know how long that's going to last. And, you know, publishing suffers like everything else when people don't have money for what is ultimately entertainment. And so from my anecdotes that, you know, talking to publishers and editors and that kind of thing, is that everyone is being very cautious because they don't know how long this is going to last. They don't know if by, you know, first quarter of next year we're going to be coming back to normal, or if it's just going to be another 2008 and it's going to be 3 years before anybody gets any money again.
Yeah, I know. I've heard.
Sorry, go, Kristi.
I was going to say I have a bit of history to toss into this. Do you know what one of the items that always seems to shoot up in like a recession or a depression, as far as purchasing habits go, and it sees its biggest spikes during. That's it. Lipstick.
Is what?
Yeah.
Lipstick.
Oh.
Yeah. Let's hear it for the
Lipstick.
What?
Classes.
Lipstick is one of the items that shoots up in sales. They see their best sales during depressions and recessions.
No way. I've never heard that.
Way.
Yeah.
Yep, it's factual. And one of the reasons is it's one of those small luxuries. You can go to the store, you can buy it. It's only 10, maybe $20, and
if even that.
We're programmed, if even that, and we're programmed as a society. I'm not getting into feminism this time around, but we're programmed as a society to make us think as women that that's going to, and some guys now too, that that's going to make us feel better. And so I'm kind of optimistic that we might see a similar trend with books. So you look at genres like romance and adventure and chick lit, right? And I could see those markets just like, could you, like, we're seeing nice weather now. What are the few things that you can do? You know, as you know, you could sit out on your porch and you can try and watch Netflix, or you could sit out on your porch and you can read a book. And it's, you know, bright. I could see the publishers going with bright covers, that kind of sunny disposition. I could see some genres having a huge uptick, kind of like lipstick does.
Yeah. You wonder if comfort reads are just going to get a big kick in the pants right now, because sometimes you just need a cozy read. You know, I mean, no offense to the people who do, like, you know, cosmic horror, eldritch fun, but
yeah, not so much Lovecraft right now. Let's not.
No.
Lovecraft,
dystopian, pandemic fiction, maybe not the best.
Oh, this would be the worst time to have your pandemic fiction book being published.
Well,
unless it was a pandemic comedy. Pandemic comedy could work right now.
I actually talked to a couple of people a while back, and they had this whole thing of all of them were freaking out about I had written a pandemic book, or I'm in the process of trying to write a pandemic book. I actually talked to one person who, honest to God, had written, oh, well, my whole thing is like this spy thriller where they genetically engineer a virus in China and release it. And I was like, oh, you poor bastard.
The thing is, if it depends. If you put that out on Kindle right now, I'm sure it would sell. 100%.
Right now. But I think that's also the sort of thing of, it's sort of, I think some of you know Timothy Long, and Timothy is great at doing the right now in the zeitgeist book that he's, I think, at least 2 or 3 times now pumped out indie books really fast and, you know, made a ton of money off. I remember during one of the last government shutdowns, he did Congress of the Dead.
That's funny.
And it sold great for 2 months.
Yeah.
And that was it. And I think there is that it's like, sure, you could put out your genetically engineered Chinese virus book right now. Not that anyone believes that's actually what happened. Any rational person.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
Not true.
But you could put that out right now and probably sell a ton of copies this summer. Yeah. Maybe. And then that would be it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And publishers, you know, if we're talking about print publishers, they play on a different time scale.
Right. And they're going to look at it and just shake their heads and go.
Out in a year.
Yeah. By the time it would be out, no one will want it.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to spin off the base question here because we've kind of talked a bit. Let me ask all of you this. I'm
Can
guessing,
I make one more point though?
Yeah,
before we
please.
move on?
Please.
The people that I think will have the most trouble are newish authors. Because I feel like the biggest thing that we've lost and the sort of biggest thing that the bookstores, the physical bookstores provide is the ability to just walk in and see what's on the new shelf or the front table. And that sort of serendipity was a big boon to someone who's releasing a book that doesn't already have a big following. And so that's kind of a hard thing. And I can already hear from sort of publishing gossip that the publishers, knowing this, are sort of doubling down on their big names and they're not taking on as much new stuff. So if you want to do authors a favor, find some debut and buy it.
Yeah, this was a bad summer to debut.
It's a horrible time to debut.
Terrible time to do.
Yeah. So it's probably going to make a difference in what the publishers choose to kind of buy and invest in right now, because God knows they've got plenty of numbers to look at. If they're looking and saying, hey, we bought this book from this debut author who's doing this really cool thriller, horror, tentacle thing, and it's really cool, but, maybe we're going to sit on it for 2 years.
I could see that happening.
And maybe
instead
stuff
has been pushed back.
Yeah, maybe we'll push that way back on the schedule, and maybe instead we will really ask, whoever our established authors are, can you push this up 6 months? And so try and fill kind of the releases with people they know that have that built-in audience who look for them.
I've actually heard that too.
You'd have to discover.
Yeah, I've actually heard specifically that publishers are looking for the thing they know is going to work. That they don't want to be gambling on anything right now. That they want
the safe bet.
Right.
But that
whatever level safe bet it is, they just want to know that, okay, we're buying the new Kristi Charish book and we know it will do this. If nothing else, we know it will do this.
Twilight number 4, run.
Right.
There we go. But having said that,
also,
that
Kristi.
doesn't. Having said that, it also doesn't mean, though, that it's doom and gloom for a new author, because you could write something that they know slots into, say, a Devil Wears Prada meets Shopaholic. And they're like, this is selling right now. And we're going to take this because we know we put this up on Amazon, and my next point was going to be Audible.
Yeah.
And we know this sucker's gonna sell. So it's not that you can't sell something. It's just, it might be a bit of a different kind of debut they're looking for right now. But Audible, we haven't really touched on Audible, and I kind of feel like that's the other one that's, I would kind of feel like Audible would skyrocket right now because
I've heard
especially if you're isolated.
Having trouble because so many people listen to it on their commute.
Yes, that exactly. Their sales are down because no one.
That and podcasts. Podcasts are having the same issue.
Yeah, the podcasts are too. Yeah.
You got your hour commute. What are you going to do? You eventually get tired of listening to the radio, so you get you know, your Audible books, you get your
Oh
podcasts.
yeah, I went through so many books when I was commuting.
Oh yeah, but when you
Wow.
don't have the commute.
But that said, that like people are going to start commuting again relatively in the near future. It's much more certain that that will happen than that the economy will recover really quickly, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
See, I would have thought that if you are, you know, especially people who maybe aren't getting the commute and they're not getting the coffee, you know, the coffee cooler anymore, they're not getting the personal interactions that they normally get on a day-to-day basis. You know, I would have thought that Audible would be a shoo-in for that, because it's, you kind of get a book read to you, but then you also get a voice in the background that you kind of feel is talking to you a bit. It's like I've been listening to more CBC radio during the pandemic than I think I've ever listened to in my life.
No, I agree. I'm
personally
actually
going
listening
through a
to a shit ton of like Marketplace and like Planet Money and like all this stuff. My sons are getting very tired of listening to the inverted yield curve.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they are irritated with it, and they will tell me.
Anyway.
But yeah, I turn it on like when I'm feeding them lunch or when I'm doing all these other things. So I'm actually listening to kind of more than I would. But then you listen to it and you're like, well, you know, what is the larger trend? It's one of those interesting things on here's your experience, but oh well, here's maybe this kind of bigger trend. It's kind of, but yeah, I agree with you, Kristi. My thought would have been, oh, this is great for it because I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Apparently.
Yeah.
Sorry, so I interrupted you earlier, Peter, when you were gonna.
No,
say something.
my quick follow-up, we've only got like, I think 5 minutes left, 5, 6
Okay.
minutes. What I was curious about, because I know I'm guessing all of us are at some point in some level of progress on a book right now.
Yes.
Either finishing one, starting one, in the middle of one, whatever. Has this affected any of like your thoughts on it? I know I'm just starting like my first revision pass on a book, and it has put me in this big thing of, crap, should I have people wearing masks in this? Should I have,
Oh,
you know, because I mean, my book personally is set right now in the real world.
I have heard
contemporary. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have heard other people talk about this, how the problem is that now every book is automatically a period piece because either people are wearing masks, so 5 years from now we'll know when it was, or they're not wearing masks, so right now people are like, oh, I guess this is from before.
It's clearly pre-February 2020.
Yeah. It makes me happy. I can say I ducked that question by writing fantasy in the secondary world, so I don't have to worry about it. You know,
I'm writing historical, so
nice.
So the 1918 pandemic is 5 years in the past.
Oh.
I think that's kind of one of the things too, though, is that eventually this is going to be in the past. And I think it's a mistake. And 5 years from now, somebody's going to throw this at me. They're like, you were wrong, Kristi. But I kind of feel like it's a mistake to treat this like this is the complete, like I know a lot of people say the new normal, but you know, we've seen with other pandemics before, you know, we've had SARS, we've had MERS. This is the biggest and most severe since the 1918 flu. But even then we had people wearing masks. We had people who were very concerned about contact. And eventually that does go away and we go back to something that resembles normal. And I think people will be surprised at not downplaying how serious, you know, the pandemic is now. But I think people take for granted how quickly things are going to change back and switch back to normal again. So
it's not fundamental, eternal change.
No.
It's kind of
but I do think it sort of
mark, but
it lays down a marker, though. It's a little bit like 9/11 in that.
That's what I was thinking.
In when 9/11 happened, especially for any movie set in New York, you could instantly tell if it was before or after, and there were
do you remember
few awkward ones that were in production at the time.
I was going to say, do you remember when they pulled the Spider-Man trailer?
Yeah, because it had the
Twin Towers in
helicopter crashing between the Twin Towers. There's a lot of that. There's a great, if you look it up, there's a great YouTube video comparing Independence Day to the Spielberg War of the Worlds, which both have essentially the same plot but very different tones. And the big reason is pretty clearly that 9/11 happened between them. And so I think it's not that all the characters in the book will be wearing masks, but I think it's affected the world in such a way that like a book set after the pandemic will sort of be recognizably so. That like
It'll
it will be a
tonal
big event in the
difference.
character's recent past.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be that tonal difference in terms of you have the people, you know, that essentially you have, you know, in as much as like, let's say you read like this gaudy 20s fun book, you still, all those characters have just been scarred by World War One.
Does anyone?
So it's always that undercurrent.
Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries.
I was going to just cite Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries. Yeah.
One of the things that they get very right in that about the time period is that, you know, set in Australia, obviously many Australians fought in World War One, and so that you can just literally ask anyone, any man, I guess, what did you do in the war, and it has affected literally everyone in their country.
Did you ever see Stephen Elliott did a movie a couple of years back, Easy Virtue?
I did not.
Basically, it's an adaptation of an old crowd. It's actually wonderful. It's really great to watch. It's funny in like all the right ways. But one of the aspects of it is it's set right after World War One, and Colin Firth's character, who is like the patriarch of the family, basically just sits out in the shed, like working on stuff. Like he came back from the war, and everyone's living up at the manor house, and he's just out in the shed, you know, working on stuff all the time.
And obviously, thank God, the pandemic is not World War One. It's not.
Yes.
That. But
Right. Yes.
I do think for some time to come, you'll be able to ask people, you know, so what did you do during the quarantine year?
Oh yes.
What was your life like?
But I also think it is good, like we've said, it's going to pass.
Yes.
Hands down. I don't know if any of you, I talked about this over on my blog a while back. I don't know if any of you saw this. True story. You know, I used to work in television and film. I worked on a sci-fi show called The Chronicle. And we did an episode. It was basically the whole idea is people who worked for a tabloid newspaper, but everything in the paper is true. And at one
for the ads.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I worked on that. So at one point, one of the episodes we filmed was about a guy who had like super low-level telekinesis, but wanted to be a superhero. So what he was doing was setting up problems, mistakes, crimes that he could stop.
That's funny.
The big one that our heroes have to stop him from is he set a bomb in a skyscraper in New York.
Yeah.
We finished filming. Dead serious. I still remember this. I remember being on the tailgate of my truck, packing up, talking with everyone. We finished filming the last day of this episode on September 10th, 2001.
Oh, Jesus.
That was the day we finished filming that episode. And the next morning...
I assume it didn't air.
It did.
No.
Really?
That's the thing. It
That
did
aired?
air. Yes.
Oh.
They did not air it in schedule. They were like,
Yeah.
okay, we're going to push that one much further down the line.
There was famously an episode of, I think it's the X-Files spinoff, The Lone Gunman, that dealt with terrorists trying to crash a plane into the World Trade Center.
Really?
Although in the show they're thwarted at the last minute. That was pulled and never aired because of...
Yeah.
Was that at the same time? Was that...
I think it was... I don't think it was quite that close, but it was definitely planned. I'm not sure how much of it was actually filmed.
Wow. So, anyway, we're pretty much out of time for this, but thank you all so much for talking.